Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Now if you do like true crime and makeup, you should absolutely subscribe because I post every single Wednesday and Sunday with a new and interesting true crime case. Whilst you're here, please make sure you subscribe, put the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload. Please engage with this video in some way, a like, comment, share. YouTube is playing me. So the case today, the case is about Donald Neilson, also known as Donald Nappy. Yeah, that was his original surname, so don't be fooled. Now, his alias was the Black Panther, and this came about after a murder of a woman's husband. Now, the woman was given a television interview, and she said that the murderer was so quick that he was like a panther. And then, because he dressed from head to toe in all black with a black hood, the news started referring to him as the Black Panther. Now, he would break into homes, he would break into post offices to rob them. However, when residents were very protective of their property and trying to scare away this intruder who's just like broken into their house, he would get very aggressive. That aggression just completely escalated over time, and he just wound up murdering anyone and everyone that he would encounter whilst committing these burglaries. Now listen, I'm maybe a bit cheeky about this guy, okay? I don't like him. He's a horrific human being. He's got the surname Nappy, so sometimes I will refer to him as Pampers. No disrespect to you if your surname's Nappy. It's not a bad surname at all. I'm Templeton, like, come on. As long as you're a nice person, then there's nothing to be complained about, okay? But people like him, I will pick fault with anything I see or hear. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Donald Neilson, aka Pampers. It's a Tuesday and I'm wearing a t-shirt that says Sunday brunch. Is that acceptable? But if I wore it on a Sunday, that would be too cheesy. But wearing it on a Tuesday, well, people will be like, girl, do you know what day it is? So Donald Neilson, he was actually born Donald Nappy. Nappy. Yeah. Like, could we just agree at this moment in time to call him Pampers? I want to call him Pampers. All in favour say aye. If I know you guys as much as I think I do, I think you will all agree that we can call him Pampers. So Pampers was born on August the 1st of 1936, and he was born in Bradford of West Riding, Yorkshire. Now I will say, as a child, Donald Neilson did experience things that no child should ever have to experience. I mean, when he was just 10 years old, his mum would pass away at the age of 33 from breast cancer. Like, that is such a young age for a child to lose a parent, but also just for an adult to die. I mean, 33 is barely an age. Apologies, I am not performing a magic show, but I did have to change my top into something a bit more strappy because Scotland is experiencing heat and we're not used to it. So when Donald was around 11 or 12 years old, he was caught breaking into a shop. Now, due to his circumstances and also his very young age, the police couldn't really do anything apart from give him like a slap in the wrist. So he got a stern warning, he got a caution. Lesson not learned though, because a bit of a repeat offender. Then in April of 1955, when Donald was just 18 years old, he would marry a woman by the name of Irene Tate, who was 20. Donald would also serve in the army for a brief period of time. He was a national serviceman in Kenya, Aden and Cyprus. However, after some time in the army, you know, serving his country, Irene, she didn't want him in the army anymore. She wanted him at home, and she did a lot of persuading, and she wound up convincing Donald to leave the army and return home in 1958. So 3 years. I think that's brief service. Or is that a long time? I mean, I guess if you're serving your country, anything's a long time, but... Now, Donald and Irene, they would go on to have a daughter together, and they would name her Catherine. Now, you know, Pampers, he's a bit worried that Catherine, you know, taking the surname Nappy, little Catherine Nappy, he was worried that she might get bullied at school. And I hate to say it, but she probably would, because children are mean, and if you've got a name like Nappy, it's not going to go down well in the playground. It's just not. So he thinks, maybe we should change her name, and whilst we're at it, we'll just change my name as well. Donald is looking out for himself. Also, I just want to say, he said that the reason he feared Catherine would be bullied is because his name sounded like Nappy. It is Nappy. So what are you saying, Donald? Anyway, they went on to change the family name to Neilson. So he became Donald Neilson, Irene would be Irene Neilson, and Catherine would be Catherine Neilson. Do you know what also made me laugh a wee bit as well is it was actually speculated that the reason Neilson chose the surname Neilson was because he bought a taxi business from a guy who was like Neilson's Taxis, right? And he didn't want to have to pay to change like the name on the taxi company. So if he kept it at Neilson, he's saving some cash. So he kept the name as Nielsen, and others speculated that they had actually used that name after the name of an ice cream van that he would take his daughter to, and this van was called Lord Neilson. It's all making sense. Now, Donald, he's what I would call a seasoned burglar, right? And especially like in his early days of committing crimes, he was experienced. Now, Donald, he had committed around 400 home burglaries. We love consistency. Do you know what I do find like a little bit funny about Donald Neilson, or you know, Donald Nappy, Little Pampers, is the fact that he was called the Black Panther. Now we'll get into that in a second, but could you imagine like this killer being referred to as the Black Panther, and then you hear that his name was Nappy? And you're like, oh, and then you see him and you're like, oh. So before Pampers became known as the Black Panther, he did have like a few other aliases that he was wanted under. One of them was the Phantom. Cue Phantom of the Opera. And his other alias was Handy Andy. Now Pampers can be a little bit of a clever cookie, right? So every couple of weeks, he would change up his like signature at a crime. So for example, he would steal like a radio from a house and then dump it and discard of it nearby. And then once the police had kind of like identified this as the signature, he would change it up again. So like they're still looking for a guy that's like leaving radios abandoned whilst he's off doing something else, like stealing a bike with stabilizers, you know? So it was a way of throwing the police off his scent. But, you know, at one point, Donald, he's not loving the burglaries anymore, right? He's getting a bit bored. I mean, he has committed over 400 of them. There's got to be a time of retirement. So he decides he would like to up the ante a wee bit. But he's not going to get a job. Excuse me. No. He is going to just like up his crimes a bit. So he decided to start robbing like little post offices in the area. And between 1971 and 1974, he would commit around 18 of these crimes, robbing the small post offices. Now, over time with these crimes, he would become more violent and more aggressive because the people who, you know, were in these post offices, they were very, very protective over their property, and they were almost trying to like guard it and stop him from committing the crime. Now, because of this, Donald, he gets very violent very quick. So, February of 1972 comes around, and Nappy Pampers Neilson, he decided to enter a sub-post office which was actually located in a private home in Rochdale Road in Haywood. Now, Lesley Richardson, who owned this, and his wife, they woke up out of their sleep when they heard the break-in take place. Now, Lesley Richardson, without hesitation, he jumped up out of his bed ready to protect his wife and also his property. So he goes and approaches, you know, Nappy Pampers Neilson, and he sort of like meets him in the hallway, and this is when Pampers draws out a sawn-off shotgun. Now, to try and like disguise himself, he's already like wearing this dark hood, all in black, and then in this like fake accent, he says, "This is loaded." Now, Lesley Richardson, he noticed that the way that Donald was holding the gun, it was like pointing up to the ceiling. So he was like, do you know what? I have a bit of time before I'm in any immediate danger. So he kind of like plunges forward to grab the gun, and he's like, we'll see if it's loaded. And I was like, Lesley, you badass. Love that. Now, when Lesley had grabbed the gun, he aimed the gun still at the ceiling and fired 2 shots. And at first I was like, why did he fire it to the ceiling? But then I'm thinking, probably to get the neighbours' attention. Like if he couldn't phone 999, they could. Now, Lesley Richardson, he proceeded to rip the hood off of Nielsen that he was wearing, you know, to see who the intruder was. As he did this, Nielsen put all of his weight into stamping on Lesley's foot, and this was so severe that he wound up with several broken bones throughout his entire foot, and then he kneed him in the groin, which of course caused him to like hunch over and fall to the ground basically. So unfortunately, Pampers was able to escape. But Lesley had seen him, and surely this would be a good thing. But unfortunately, it wasn't, because Lesley, God bless his wee soul, right? He tried so hard, but he gave the police several inaccurate details regarding Donald's appearance, which makes sense because he was in a hood, they were in the dark, and also he only really seen Donald's face for a brief second. So the details that he provided to the police, they done like a, you know, one of the drawings, and they were like, well, this brings up no one. So yeah, he tried to be helpful and he tried his best, but I guess in that situation, I mean, yeah, you're thinking about seeing the intruder, but are you really taking it in when so much else is going on? Like, can't blame him for that. Now, it would be in February of 1974 when Donald Neilson would go on to commit his first 3 murders. So during post office robberies, remember I was saying he was getting more and more aggressive. Now he was just prepared going into these situations that it was going to get violent really quick. And he wound up killing 2 sub-postmasters and also the husband of a sub-postmistress. Now, he also brutally battered a sub-postmistress by the name of Margaret Grayland. After her attack, she was able to give a very, very accurate description of this man, so they have much more of an idea of who they're looking for now. In February of 1974, Donald would shoot dead a sub-postmaster by the name of Donald Skepper. All he had done was confronted Donald Neilson when he found him intruding on his property. And just because Donald Skepper had spotted him and confronted him and asked, you know, why are you on my property? Donald Neilson thought that it was okay to coldly shoot Donald Skepper dead. Like, he is at this point, he is just so unhinged. Whoever gets in his line of fire is going to die. Then it would only be 7 months later when Donald Neilson would commit another murder. This time it was Derek Aston. Derek Aston lived in Baxenden of Lancashire, and again he owned a little small post office. Now of course, as usual, when Aston sees this intruder in his post office, he confronts him, and yet again Pampers thinks it's his God-given right to kill someone. When he's intruding on their property and putting fear into them, he thinks it's his God-given right. Only 9 weeks later, in November, 55-year-old Sydney Grayland would be shot dead from Nielsen. Now, Nielsen had raided his post office in Langley in the West Midlands, which of course would result in Sydney yet again confronting him, trying to protect his property and his business. And yet again was shot dead in cold blood by Nielsen. Now Nielsen was able to escape with £800 in cash and postal orders. Now the postal orders are very, very, very important. Now if, like me, you're wondering, where did Donald Neilson get this nickname? He doesn't really seem like a Black Panther type. Now I wondered the exact same, and as it turns out it was the Baxenden murder that caught the attention of the name the Black Panther. Now Derek Aston's wife Marion, she done like a television interview, right, regarding her husband's murder. She said that her husband's murderer was so quick, he was like a panther. So the news reporter, he ended the piece by saying, "Where is the Black Panther?" Do you know I had an American accent? Because they're actually from England. Now we're going to talk about Lesley Whittle, who would become a victim of Donald Neilson at just 17 years old. Lesley would also be Donald's youngest victim. So Lesley Whittle, she was described as a very compassionate and intelligent individual. She had really enjoyed tap dancing, especially when she was a child. She was the daughter of a noted coach transport business owner by the name of George Whittle. Now, he co-owned Whittle Coaches with his common law wife, Dorothy. If, like me, you're wondering, what is a common law wife? Because I had absolutely no idea. Well, it turns out common law marriage is basically when 2 individuals are under the same roof and they class themselves as married, apart from they don't have all that legal stuff, like they don't throw a big wedding, don't sign documents. Common law marriage is an agreement between two people to consider themselves married, basically. That's a very simplified version. Any lawyers out there, leave it below a better explanation that explains it clearer than I. Now, what's really sad about Lesley Whittle's case is she had actually been targeted because her family was so wealthy. So the Whittle family, they were extremely wealthy. They lived in the biggest house in the mining village of Highley, Shropshire. Now, their property was beautiful. It was admired by everyone, it was detached, it had 6 bedrooms, it was honestly like a dream. But when George Whittle and Dorothy sort of, got in their common law marriage agreement, decision, I don't know what to call it, well, he decided to rewrite his will to leave his entire fortune to his common law wife, Dorothy, and then also his children, Ronald and Lesley. Now, George, he had decided to not leave any of his fortune to Selina Whittle, who wasn't even his ex-wife. They were still married. They had separated but decided not to get a divorce. I don't know if it was like too much hassle, but he left nothing to her. Now, 2 years after George's death, Selina decided to go ahead with legal proceedings to try and get her hands on some of the fortune. She felt like she was entitled to some. Now, because of the wealth of this family and how well known they were, this was heavily reported in the Daily Express newspaper. And this is where Nielsen would learn of this fortune and decide that he was also entitled to some of it, and he would get it any means necessary. Now, everything about this case is so bloody disturbing, but what really got to me was the fact that Donald admitted that he had been planning this home invasion and robbery for 3 years. For 3 years, he worked on this non-stop, absolutely determined that some of that fortune would one day be his. Now, on the 14th of January 1975, Donald would enter the Whittle home, he would go to Lesley's bedroom and kidnap her. Now, what the family and what the police did not know at this time was the fact that Donald Neilson had been in and out of their house on multiple occasions. And he did this in preparation of the kidnapping robbery, because he was like, do you know what, if I don't want to be caught at the kidnapping stage, then I'm going to need to know the layout of this house. So he had been in and out of that house multiple nights, seeing how he could creep about without being caught, getting a lay of the land. This is how he knew where Lesley would be. So Donald finds Lesley asleep in her bed, and then he proceeds to shake her until she wakes up. The second her eyes open, there is just fear spread across her face, and this is when he covers her mouth to like almost gag her so she can't scream for any help whatsoever. Now, before they leave, he does allow her to put on her slippers and her dressing gown, but that's it. Then ordered Lesley to get out of the house and to enter his green Morris 1300 car. Now, once Lesley was in the vehicle, he bound her wrists and her ankles together. He made her lie down in the back seat with like an old mattress kind of thing on top of her, so if they drove by anyone, they wouldn't see Lesley in the back. Now, Nielsen, he does some quick maths, right? And he decides that 50 grand, that's not going to be missed from the big fortune. So he's going to request 50 grand ransom in order for the family to get Lesley back. And he had already, wrote this ransom down on a note, and he left that note in the house when he was taking Lesley. So the morning comes in the Whittle family home, and Dorothy notices that Lesley has not come down for her breakfast. So she decides to go up to Lesley's room to wake her up. At this point, she's not assuming anything bad. She's just thinking that her daughter slept in. Now, she goes into Lesley's room, and all she finds is Lesley's clothes laid out for the day. So Lesley was someone who would plan her outfit the night before and lay it on her chair, so in the morning she could just get dressed, no fuss, knew what she was wearing. Her outfit was still lying there, but Lesley was nowhere to be seen. And then Dorothy sees the ransom note. Now, as soon as Dorothy takes a look at this note, she is right on the phone to the police to immediately get them involved. She wants her daughter back and she has contacted them at the earliest time possible. She's only just discovered that Lesley's gone missing. Devastatingly, there was apparently a lot of police errors involved in this investigation, and other circumstances meant that Lesley's brother Ronald was not able to deliver the 50 grand ransom money to the designated place at the designated time. There was some sort of delay caused by police errors and other circumstances that were out of their control. Now, heartbreakingly, on the 7th of March of 1975, the body of Lesley Whittle would be found hanging from a wire at the bottom of a drainage shaft. Now, a post-mortem examination conducted on Lesley did conclude that she had died from vagal inhibition and not strangulation. It was determined that the shock of this fall had just caused her heart to stop. Now, in December of 1975, two police officers by the name of Tony White and Stuart Mackenzie, they were sitting by the side of the road in a Panda car. Now, I'll insert a photo of that. It's basically like a police car. And they were both just keeping an eye on the A60 road. This road led out of Mansfield in North Nottinghamshire. So as they're sitting in this car, they spot what looks to be a very suspicious man. Now, the man's carrying a hold all, and as he walks by the Panda car, he averts his gaze so the police can't see his face. Now, immediately the police are like, red flag. Officer Mackenzie, he shouts the guy to come over to the car because he wants to ask him some questions. Like, number one, why are you acting like a weirdo? So, the police, they get him over, right? And all the police are wanting is to ask a few questions, have a conversation, a little bit of verbal ping pong, right? So when they're asking Nielsen, where are you coming from? Your wee hold all. He says that he's on his way back from work. However, we all know what Donald Neilson does when he gets backed into a corner. He attacks. So out of nowhere, he reaches into his little old lady hold all, pulls out the sawn-off shotgun, and then he orders Officer White to get in the back of the car. Now, the officer, he's complying, he will get in the back of the car, but he goes to open the door, and Nielsen basically accuses him of trying something, nice try, climb over the seat. So he gets Officer White to climb over the seat into the back. Now, Nielsen, he gets into the passenger seat, and as soon as he's in the passenger seat, he holds up the sawn-off shotgun under Officer Mackenzie's armpit. So Nielsen had demanded that the two police officers drive him to Blydeworth, or it might be called Blidworth. Sorry, I think it's Blidworth, it's spelled Blidworth. Who knows? You let me know. Now, this was 6 miles away, and he had also ordered them not to look at him whilst they were in the vehicle. Now listen, maybe he's got a complex about his side profile, right? I'm not really a big fan of mine either, and I really wouldn't want them staring at mine in close proximity. But I'm going to assume it's probably because he didn't want them to be able to identify him. Okay, but he could be insecure. Now, Nielsen, he then asked the officers if there's any rope in the car. Obviously, probably going to tie them up, right? Now, Officer White, he pretends to look for some rope, and then Officer Mackenzie, he sees an opportunity to kind of throw Nielsen off. Now, Officer Mackenzie, he steers the wheel very quickly from left to right, and he says to Nielsen, is it left or right? What way is it? Now, because he's asked him this question, Nielsen then has to look forward to look and see what way they're going. As he looks, he lowers the shotgun. Officer Mackenzie, he grabs a gun and slams on the brakes, and they stop right outside Junction Chip Shop. The gun, it had actually went off and hit Officer White in the hand, but luckily, was his hand, not his heart or his head, so all good. Then Officer Mackenzie, he stumbles out onto the road and approaches a chip shop, sort of shouting for help. Two locals who are standing in the chip shop queue, they run over to the officer's aid to help them. Now, Nielsen, he's trying to escape. These men, they tackle him and basically restrain him, but they got a bit physical to the point that Officer White and Officer Mackenzie actually had to protect Nielsen because these men were just taking no prisoners. Now, in the investigation that took place afterwards, they were then able to locate Nielsen's fingerprints on the drainage pipe where Lesley had been found. Also, in an interview at Kidsgrove Police Station, they were able to get a confession out of him where he confessed to the murder of Lesley Whittle. On July the 1st of 1976, Nielsen was convicted for the kidnapping and murder of Lesley Whittle and was given a life sentence. Just 3 weeks later, he was also convicted of the murders of the 2 sub-postmasters and the husband of the sub-postmistress. In total, Nielsen would receive 5 life sentences. Now, Mr. Justice Mars Jones, the judge who was dealing his sentence, he also gave him an additional 61 years. 21 for kidnapping Lesley and another 10 for blackmailing her mother. Now, 3 further sentences of 10 years were imposed upon Nielsen for 2 burglary charges, stolen guns and ammunition, and also the possession of the sawn-off shotgun. Now, he would be acquitted of the attempted murders of Margaret Grayland and also the attempted murder of Officer White. However, he would be charged with grievous bodily harm on Mrs. Grayland. Now, do we all remember Irene? You know, Nielsen's wife, Irene Tate? Well, she wasn't so innocent, as it turns out. Now, when her husband didn't come home that very day, she started to get really worried. But it didn't really seem like she was too worried about him, more if he had been caught for something. And she takes it upon herself to burn 50 postal orders. I wonder why. Like, why would she do this if she didn't know what was going on? And when he's coming back with these postal orders and then it's in the news that someone was murdered and postal orders were stolen, are you telling me, Irene babe, that you don't know that your husband's a murderer? Because I'm not getting that at all. You have to have known what he was up to. Now, Irene, she would later be convicted of cashing 80 stolen postal orders that her husband had acquired in his raids. Now, she would say that she was forced into this. She didn't want to do it. They never do, right? Irene didn't want to do it. Tale as old as time. Tale as old as time. She didn't want to do it, right? So, like, she's a victim here, apparently, according to Irene. And her solicitor actually said that Irene was not guilty and that her husband had a lot of influence on her. They even said Nielsen was somewhat of a Svengali who exercised a hypnotic influence. Wow. Now, Irene, she would be sentenced to 12 months in prison. However, she would only wind up serving 8 because she was released on good behaviour. I just feel like she should have been charged with more, but hey, that's just my opinion. What do I know? Now, in the early hours of December the 17th, 2011, Nielsen was taken from Norwich Prison to Norfolk and Norwich University Hospital. At this point, he was suffering from really severe breathing difficulties and then he passed away the next day, age 75. Am I supposed to be sad about this? Because I'm not. Enjoy hell, hope it's warm. Now, before I do end today's video, I do just want to take a second with everyone and remember the victims of the case today and think about their families. I think we need to remember that these people in these cases, they are real people. Their families are real people with feelings who have suffered a huge loss, and these victims have suffered a horrific end. The victims are someone's family, they're someone's friends, and it's just so important that we remember them more than we remember the person who took their life, because that person is evil, irrelevant, disgusting human beings, and we just really need to, bring the focus right back round to the victims. I hopefully will have their photos on my screen right now if I have been able to find them. If not, I do apologise. I do look everywhere that I possibly can, but if it's not on the internet, I try and think, well, maybe it's for a reason. Maybe family members, friends don't want it on the internet. I'm just sending so much love and prayer to the families of the victims, and I just hope that the victims are at peace now. So that is it for today's True Crime and Makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting. It's one that I've not really seen spoken about, so I really wanted to, shed some light on it. Really, talk about what happened to the poor people in this case. Please remember that any case suggestions you have can be left in the comments below or sent to my email, which you will find in the description. Also down there, you'll find my Instagram and TikTok handles, as well as all the product details of what I've used on my face today, with the links if there's anything that you would like to pick up. Before you go, please make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell on so you don't miss when I upload every Wednesday and Sunday at 7:30 British Standard Time. If you can, please engage with the video in some way. A like, comment, a share goes a long way, helps me out with the algorithm of YouTube, because my god, recently it's working against me so bad. So I need your help. But that is it for this one. Stay safe, look after each other, be a good person, don't be a bad person, and until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye!